Why you should be prepared if you're a San Francisco 49ers fan and really just an NFL fan in general to be shocked by what's going to happen on draft day. Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We love and appreciate all the everydayers out there. And we always love it when you let us know that you stop by. So hit the thumbs up, the notification bell. Say hi if you're in the chat right now as we go live on this Sunday night. This podcast will be in your feeds on the audio podcast on Monday morning, first thing. So if you're on your way to work, we appreciate you as well. If you're new to the program, welcome. We love you. We appreciate you as well. Subscribe on YouTube and anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Croc, they're not ready. They're not ready, Croc, for what's about to happen with the 2025 NFL draft. Groupthink.
It's always crazier than what people think.
Oh, my God. It's always so much crazier than people think. Groupthink is a big part of it. I know we have our consensus boards. I want to talk about sort of the consensus big board, what that might look like for the San Francisco 49ers. But I put out a tweet this weekend, and I said something to the effect, because I want to talk about a couple of prospects in particular, Croc. But I said, if I had to bet right now, not who I would take, but if I was like putting money on who the likeliest picks were for the San Francisco 49ers at pick 11, and there's certainly many candidates, I said it would be between Will Campbell, the offensive lineman from LSU, whether you think he's a tackle or a guard. I think teams might be split on that. And I put another name out there, Mykel Williams, who's a defensive end from Georgia. And I got some interesting responses to that, Croc. And a lot of the responses started with no chance blank, blank, blank happens. There's no way blank, blank goes blank, blank. And that's how I know, Croc, that they're not ready. They're not ready for what's actually going to happen on draft day. Because if you think it's wild that Will Campbell could go with the 11th pick in the draft because of either that's too high or too low, then you're out of your mind. If you think that it's wild that Mykel Williams, who's 6'5" with 35-inch arms, that's 265 pounds, and went to the University of Georgia, which is a factory for NFL defensive linemen, you think it's wild that he would go as high as pick number 11? Then you're not paying attention, and you're not ready for what's about to happen, because those things aren't even wild, Croc. Those aren't even mildly interesting wrinkles to what could be and what actually will happen in the 2025 NFL draft. It's about to be nuts. And this draft, Croc, in my opinion, because how close some of the rankings are, because how many incomplete prospects there are, this draft could be as wild where guys go compared to consensus as any draft that we've seen in recent history.
Now, I've lost track about how many times I brought up Mykel Fitzpatrick on this podcast in that draft. But I will say this. I did a mock draft, and I had the 49ers taking him at pick 9. And that was the response I got. There's no way Mykel Fitzpatrick goes at pick 9 to the San Francisco 49ers. He will be long gone. He's a guy that's going to be drafted in the top 5. And I do believe he was a top 5 prospect in that class. And clearly he's had a great career so far, and he's been an all-pro and all that. But people could not fathom the thought of him going at pick 9. He was going to be gone long before that. And lo and behold, on draft day, the 49ers had an opportunity to draft him. So I definitely don't say, oh, this guy will be gone. You just don't know. I think we'll use another example. Justin Fields. We knew that the 49ers were a little cool on Justin Fields, but he was an extremely talented guy who was very productive at Ohio State. He had all the intangibles that you ideally would like to see from a quarterback prospect coming out of college. And I don't think any of us foresaw him being drafted outside of the top 10. Now, he was drafted just a pick or two outside of 10, but people, if you would have told them like, oh, Justin Fields is going to go pick 12 or whatever, like, no, or pick 11. No, Justin Fields, he's going to, if he doesn't go to the 49ers, there were a couple other teams picking. I think one of them was the Carolina Panthers, I believe, around pick 8, and nobody thought he would go past that. So, there's a lot of different things and crazy scenarios where sometimes there's things that we're not privileged to know. Sometimes there may be things about a prospect that just turn certain teams off, and then somebody does draft him. I think that happened with, some of the big guys out of Georgia. So your wildest scenario is not really wild when it pertains to the NFL draft, especially when that day comes.
Did you hear the quote from Jets owner Woody Johnson this week about the 2021 NFL draft? By the way, congratulations to Trey Lance. A lot of people thought he was headed to the CFL. He has signed an NFL contract with the Los Angeles Chargers, which, look, as far as NFL teams go, I think that's a great fit for Trey Lance. Speaking of crazy drafts, I mean, that's a great example, Croc. And I think Jim Harbaugh's best talent as a head coach, especially as it pertains to quarterbacks, is giving them confidence. And Trey Lance needs a lot of confidence. And more than that, he needs to play, which is why I think the CFL or the AFL, XFL, whatever it's called, would have been a good spot for him. Like, he needs to play, right? And like we can kind of, we kind of know where Trey Lance's career is going, whether he's a backup or a number 3 or not in the NFL at all, right? It might not be salvageable at this point. He's, by the way, younger than quarterbacks who are in the 2025 NFL draft.
Trey Lance, somebody just hit me on Twitter and was like, I don't know, they call me some kind of like Trey Lance fanboy or something along those lines. And it's like, dude, he was drafted number 3 overall. He was someone who had a lot of talent. He was someone who was clearly raw. And the biggest thing, my biggest takeaway from the Trey Lance quote unquote era, which did not last long, was, hey, he needs to play. And then when he didn't get a chance, and even when Brock Purdy showed up, and Brock Purdy, I mean, from day one, stepped on the field, he was terrific. And I just remember the Miami Dolphins game. I'm like, hey, this might be some trouble for Trey Lance. My take after that was never that Trey Lance should play over Brock Purdy. My take was never that, it was just like, hey, you spent a lot of resources on this guy. Are you really going to let him walk and not even give him any kind of shot to compete after using so much capital on him? And he only started 2-3 games or whatever it was at that time. But no fanboying over him. He's proven so far to this point at the NFL level that he's just not good enough, and maybe he needed more rep. Maybe that first year, if he never got hurt, we'd see a different trajectory for his career, or maybe not, because he's going to other opportunities or had other opportunities, and he struggled to beat out guys who were QB2s or projected QB2s. So there's no ill will towards Trey Lance. Man, I hope he does awesome, as I root for, all of these guys. But and if there is anybody that can potentially help him as it pertains to confidence and getting him to be maybe what his peak performance is, and maybe his peak performance is a 3rd string quarterback and a long-term backup, whatever that is. But Jim Harbaugh may be the right guy to help him and maybe save him from the CFL, at least for another few years.
Johnny in the chat says, yep, he has 1 year of playing in college. Trey Lance has played 20 football games since high school. It's insane. And he was drafted in the NFL 4 years ago. It's pretty wild where he's at. I didn't mean to go down this Trey Lance rabbit hole, but the quote from Woody Johnson, who's the owner of the New York Jets, who signed Justin Fields this offseason. Reflecting on quarterbacks in the 2021 draft, Jets owner Woody Johnson says, quote, "It was Fields or Trevor Lawrence. And of course, the team that he owns didn't take either one of those guys." But he was talking about how, thinking back, remember that crazy draft in 2021? There was 2 really top quarterbacks. It was Trevor Lawrence and it was Justin Fields, right? And it's like, hey, Woody, your team drafted a quarterback that year, number 2, and it wasn't either one of those guys. It was Zach Wilson. And I was like, by the way, he was like the ambassador of whatever at that point in time. So he like wasn't around the team. It's like, don't you remember what it was like in 2021? Weren't you there? You were the owner of the team. It wasn't Lawrence and the guy you just signed, because you drafted a different guy, and you could have drafted the guy you just signed in Justin Fields. So look, even owners of the teams aren't prepared for what's going to happen in this draft, Grok. That's my point right now. I want to talk more about some crazy scenarios. There's some reports out there. Sources be damned about these reports. Let's talk about some reports that are out there with the 49ers, and then let's talk about our own ideas of what could happen for the San Francisco 49ers in the 2025 NFL draft. And I think just some folks out there aren't ready for how wild this is about to be. And we're less than 3 weeks away, almost 2 weeks away from the 2025 NFL draft. Let's get into it next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. And taxes used to be a lot different than they are today. They used to be waiting and wondering and worrying and wondering if you were going to get any money back at all. Then waiting, wondering, worrying some more. Now taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you and your taxes undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Croc, did you see the report about the 49ers? And this is kind of unsubstantiated report, and I don't even know what the genesis of this report was. But essentially, the report was that the San Francisco 49ers are going to trade down from pick 11 to the end of round 1 and draft Bowling Green tight end Harold Fannin, who's generally thought of as maybe a 3rd round draft pick at the end of round 1. First of all, what are your thoughts about that unsubstantiated report, which is clearly it's a BS report? But what are your thoughts when you heard a report like that about the San Francisco 49ers in the 2025 draft?
You said, you talked about wild things happening on draft day, and that may be one of the wildest, right? Now, I have to be careful with my words, because if I word it a certain way, the fan base will accuse me of hating this prospect. That's what they do with Brock Purdy. They accuse me of hating Brock Purdy for whatever reason.
Well, Croc is clearly a hater. We all know that. That's been well documented here on the podcast.
So this is one of those moments where I think it would be wild to draft Harold Fannin in the 1st round. But that does not mean that I do not like Harold Fannin or what he brings. And we've identified a lot of traits that he has. He's a very unique prospect, runs a little tight, but has really good right after catch ability. I think his versatile usage is terrific. He's not the biggest guy as a tight end, and we'd like to see him, in the blocking game a little bit more and what that looks like. Terrific hand-eye coordination, understands how to settle in soft spots. Does a lot of really good things, but he is not a 1st round. I don't like to say what somebody is or isn't. I don't see him being a 1st round tight end. Like, that's not what I saw. Now, if you could have maybe tricked me into thinking, hey man, the 49ers, they pick, with the 11th pick in the 3rd round, and they want to trade back into the 2nd round, I would believe it to some extent, even though I would say that's a little rich for my blood. But 1st round, that's pretty wild. Like the prospect, would not draft him in the 1st round.
And I totally agree with everything you said. And the idea that the 49ers would do that is kind of preposterous. And first of all, it's not going to happen. It's just as unlikely as any mock draft you see out there with any regular old prospect that could go around pick 11 going to the San Francisco 49ers, right? But it's also not impossible. And that's kind of where I'm at with this. first of all, Vitamin Peanut Butter in the chat with a great point. So who is moving up from the end of round one? So that's the first part of this. Like the 49ers drafting Harold Fannin is not the wild part of this. The craziest part of this whole rumor that was thrown out there was that the 49ers are going to trade back. Who's trading up and trading up for what? The draft is so hard to project. It's not even possible for that report to be real and exist because the 49ers can't possibly know who's going to be on the board when they're taken at 11, who's going to want to trade up to get that player that's on the board at pick 11, and who's going to be there for the San Francisco 49ers wherever they trade back to with that team that trades up. You can't possibly know all of those things right here today. So that report cannot be accurate because it's literally not possible to know those things as we sit today, even if the San Francisco 49ers love Harold Fannin. But at the same time, if something like that happened, 49ers fans would lose their mind, right? Because it would be bonkers, because it is bonkers, because it's way out there. But you know what else is way out there? Imagine, Croc, if last year at this time on April 6th, if we made a mock draft and we said, you know what, San Francisco 49ers pick 31, Ricky Pearsall. Would that be met with applause? Would that be met with anybody who said this is realistic and we think this is going to happen? Yet it actually did happen.
I think most people would told us that they would have commented it's a bad mock draft and the 49ers would never draft that receiver that high. I did, however, remember, I like to do one mock draft every year. I had the 49ers taking Ricky Pearsall in the second round, not the first round. So I did like the prospect. The 49ers just liked him a round higher. I will say as it pertains to, let's compare Ricky Pearsall and Harold Fannin. At least on paper, Ricky Pearsall checked off all the, just the athleticism, the things that you want to see out of a receiver drafting at the tail end of the first round. Harold Fannin is he's a 4.7 tight end, running a 4.7. Is he a guy that's going to run away? Like, what makes him special enough to where you would trade back and then that would be your first pick? Other than, good hands and does some good things, but there's also some projection because of an athletic threshold. If he was maybe Ingram, when Ingram was coming out of Ole Miss and he ran like 4.42, then it's like, okay, I could see, 49ers want to trade back into the first round to get Ingram. Okay, I get it. Harold Fannin, I don't think there's anything that he traits-wise that translate to the NFL on paper and the analytics and all that. I don't know if there's anything that makes you have to do that. Because again, even with Ricky Pearsall tested extremely well. So he checked off a lot of the boxes to where you could justify making that pick at 31. Fannin does from a production standpoint, but because of the manufactured touches that he was getting, it's still hard to know exactly how that translates to the NFL.
Yeah, it's really tough with Fannin because as much as you might like him as a move tight end, and the 49ers, first of all, have George Kittle at tight end. So you'd be drafting a backup tight end in the first round. And it's the same problem we have with Tyler Warren at pick 11. And on top of already having a really good tight end, unless he's a draft day trade and you trade away George Kittle, right? Which is the unthinkable at this point. I mean, he's a lifetime 49ers as far as I'm concerned. And then, so he's a move tight end. Well, the 49ers don't have a backup move tight end. They have a number 2 Y tight end, more of a blocker that they signed in free agency. So they've got that taken care of. So, they might have a little bit of a need or a want for a move tight end. But then you start thinking about, so Harold Fannin's a 6'3", 240 tight end, not the greatest blocker. So you're looking at a power slot receiver. So, you're a power slot. Well, how dynamic are you? Where are you going to win? You're a 4'7" power slot, little tight in the hips, good after the catch, some physicality there, but it all doesn't add up to a first round player. So
Juwan Jennings, right? Essentially, we're talking about what Juwan Jennings is, but he was a 7th round pick. We like Juwan Jennings and what he's been for us at the NFL level. But we didn't trade back and then make him our first pick. He was a 7th round pick who was initially released and brought back on practice squad.
Exactly. And so when you put that all together and everything we just explained about Harold Fannin sounds almost exactly like Juwan Jennings. Who's a 7th round pick, not a first round pick, or even a late first round pick, or wherever you trade, even a 3rd round pick. And so It gets very difficult. And then you start projecting again the trades. And JH in the chat says, I'd imagine you get quite the haul for trading back from pick 11 to the back end of the first round. Yeah, you would get like a future first round pick. So again, I always ask the question. Everyone's always like, oh, trade down. Okay. With who for what? Because you're gonna tell me some team in the 20s gives you their next year's first round pick to go up to pick 11 to draft a player? Who's that player gonna be? And so that all starts to get very, very difficult to project at this point, which is why obviously that report is BS and is unsubstantiated for a reason. But as much of BS as that report is, it's not impossible, Croc. And imagine
we just wouldn't do it. If Eric
Right.
Crocker and Brian Peacock were GM and co-GM or whatever, like that just would be something that we would never do. But there's been other things we wouldn't do, and the 49ers have done it, and some has worked out. I don't think you and I would have traded a second, a third, a fourth, and a fifth, or whatever for Christian McCaffrey at the time that they did it, coming off of the couple years that he had previously,
Yeah.
right? Like you and I wouldn't have done that. And I think short term, obviously right now, looking a little weird, but for a year and a half, it was like, hey, he was excellent.
You know what? I haven't heard from those folks, Croc, that were coming at us about, oh, what about that trade now? Greatest trade in NFL history. And it's like, oh, wait, hold on. Oh, running back got hurt. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that happened, Croc. And so those folks, we haven't heard from them in a while about that draft, about that trade, whether it's good, whether it's bad or not. It's very interesting how those kind of things happen.
And the toughest thing out of it is you gave that up. And again, Christian McCaffrey, terrific.
Wow.
All pro. He was amazing. Everything that they wanted him to be, he was that for a year and a half, but the results were the same. And I'm not putting that on him, but you have been to conference championship game and Super Bowl with Raheem Mostert, and you did it with CMC. Again, awesome. Matter of fact, he might hurt you in the Super Bowl. He fumbled, but again, I'm not putting it on him, but the results didn't change.
And that, running backs aren't devalued in the NFL because they're not talented. Them being talented is not the reason they're devalued. Running backs are devalued in the NFL because the replacement level is so high. You look at this draft and people are like, oh, this is such a great running back class. 3 of them are going to go in the first round. And my response to that is, no. It's such a great running back class that you can get a great one later. So you wait to draft them. You don't draft them earlier. That's my response. Some people see it differently. We won't talk about running backs. I want to talk about some positions that I don't think the 49ers are going to draft a running back at pick 11. Who knows? You never know with Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers and the NFL draft. It is wild. It is crazy. And you will be shocked by what happens. And maybe that's the shocking thing. I don't think that's going to be it. But let's talk about some players who are more likely to be drafted high and why even some players you think aren't likely might be even more likely than you expect for the 49ers in the draft at pick 11 next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Monarch Money. And if you've ever checked your bank account and you wonder, like, where'd all that money go between dining out, online shopping, entertainment? It's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, spending all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When you start using Monarch, you realize how much you're spending: food delivery, coffee every morning, and then budget smarter, save more money. And here's the best part: managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com. Get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Hey, Peacock, we're talking about the trade for Christian McCaffrey. And one thing that I do appreciate with it, right, whether I would have done it or not, is that it was an all-in move.
Yep.
It was them saying, we are going for it. We think we are in a prime position to make a move that's going to put us over the top. Do you foresee them doing anything like that this offseason, or is this truly kind of I don't want to say it's a rebuild, but kind of just they've got to reload the chamber a little bit. No all-in moves. Maybe that comes a year or two from now.
Man, I could see them making a big move or a big trade, but it's hard to figure out what the player would be because that player can't be at the top of their market in contract. So essentially, you're trading for a player who's still in their rookie contract. So who's the big trade, the big move where you're going to add somebody who, even if it's in the short term and maybe whatever the finances in the future are the finances of the future. And for right now, they're still on their rookie contract and they would be less expensive player as far as cash expenditures go in the short term. Maybe that could be a move, but otherwise I don't see it. And the 49ers are an aggressive organization. So, you shouldn't rule out trades or any maneuvers they make, whether it's the draft or otherwise, but I can't see them taking on money. And most of those big moves, you're taking on a player who's going to be expensive. And so that's why I don't really see that type of move. Chris H in the chat says, I wouldn't be surprised if they drafted Travion Henderson in the second round. I think Travion Henderson is the perfect Kyle Shanahan running back. I think he would be amazing. I bet Kyle Shanahan loves Travion Henderson. But this is kind of goes back to the running back thing is like, okay, well, you get a good running back, but you want him to break down and get injured, which is part of the reason why running backs are less valuable because they get injured so often. And you don't want your guy to get injured. So now you have this great running back, but you don't want to give him all the touches. So what do? You spend another second round pick on another running back to share the time with the running back you already spent so much to get, right? And so it starts to get silly with how much you're spending on a running back. If Christian McCaffrey wasn't around, I'd probably mock Travion Henderson to the 49ers at pick 43 every single time. I think he's a perfect fit for the San Francisco 49ers. I just don't see it. I don't see how you can spend a high pick on a running back this year. But
do you think in the time that Kyle Shanahan has been the head coach for the 49ers, do you think any other team has had running backs miss more games than the 49ers? I feel like after Carlos Hyde's the first year, and it's interesting because Carlos Hyde was supposed to be a guy that didn't quite fit what they wanted to do, but he played every game. And after that, I feel like there's been injury after injury after injury every time they try to get a guy going. I mean, they just miss time.
Running backs get injured everywhere, but it doesn't feel like the 49ers have even more injuries. But I think part of it is because of how Kyle Shanahan uses his running backs, because he doesn't use the second guy until the first guy's hurt. Right. So it's like if they split time, maybe neither guy gets hurt, but instead you use one guy till he gets hurt. That guy gets hurt. Then you use the next guy all the time till he gets hurt. Now you're on the third guy. So I think that's absolutely part of it. But running backs just get hurt. And again, that's part of it. Like it's the attrition and the high replacement level. That is why running backs are devalued. So we've talked a lot about for the 49ers, a player we both like for the Niners, Mason Graham, Croc. Armand Membu would be an easy fit for the San Francisco 49ers, I think, at offensive tackle. I think Will Campbell is another player that would make sense for the San Francisco 49ers. I think Kyle Shanahan would love Will Campbell. I think he's going to be a coach's favorite. He goes high as pick number 4 in the draft. Some people might see him as tackle. Some people might see him as guard. The teams that draft him early might probably see him more at tackle.
Love Will Campbell, by the way.
Yeah.
Campbell and Simmons, probably out of all the guys we've watched, and we've watched a lot of guys, we're talking in any position. You could say receiver, defensive back, linebacker, D-line, edge, whatever. Those were my 2 favorite films to watch, Campbell and Simmons. I just think I'd have those guys top 2 prospects that we've watched so far.
Rock solid, ready to go. Simmons has the injury, and so that kind of hurts his stock for being someone that you would draft at pick 11. There's a lot of guys with some off-field and different reasons why you might not draft them at pick 11, which brings me to the next guy, Mykel Williams out of Georgia, that I want to talk about here, Croc, because Mykel Williams is an interesting prospect because he didn't blow us away. We watched him on tape. We thought he was a first-round guy, but we were probably like, yeah, maybe we'll probably draft a different guy at pick 11. But you're talking about a guy who's 6'5", 265 pounds. He ran a 4.78 to 4.8 at his pro day, which isn't blazing, but he's a defensive end, right? Long arms. But he's one of the few clean prospects in this class. Unlike unlike James Pierce, doesn't have the off-field stuff and is more prototype size for a defensive end in a 4-3. Because that's one thing in this class, Croc, because there's so many nose tackles, so many like stand-up edge rushers. Like it's a really good year to run a 3-4 defense. I feel like just the straight 4-3, like who are your guys? Mykel Williams is one of those. And unlike Shamar Stewart, who had a great combine, Mykel Williams has more sack production. And he came from Georgia, which is just like churning out defensive line prospects to the NFL every single year. I think people are going to be shocked how high Mykel Williams goes. And they might be surprised to see Mykel Williams go to the San Francisco 49ers at 11, or potentially even go before the 49ers pick at number 11. And so I just wanted to talk about some clean prospects. There were some reports about Tyler Warren. Some teams canceled their private visits with Tyler Warren because essentially teams were like, look, you're clean. We know exactly who you are. We don't really need to bring you in. And so when you see prospects that are visiting teams, sometimes it's because the team really likes that prospect, wants to learn a little bit more about them. Sometimes it's because that team just needs more information about a prospect too. And they don't really love them, but they want to learn more about them and finish their background and finish their evaluation of a prospect. And so when you start looking at clean...
Real quick, I have a question because you talked about Mykel Williams.
Yeah.
Do you have just so people can kind of get a vision of what he is, do you have any kind of player comp for him?
I mean, the easiest comp for him is Aldon Smith. If you look at height, weight, speed coming out of school, remember Condor, the 35-inch arm length, Aldon Smith, 6'5", 265 pounds, 35-inch arm length. It's Aldon Smith. And so that's what teams are going to hope you get, but he's also got clean like character that Aldon Smith did not have. And I don't know what Aldon Smith's reports were with his character coming out of school. Aldon Smith, remember, was like a redshirt sophomore. He was really young coming out. People are actually surprised that he declared for the draft. And Balky loves himself some long arms. And if Trent Balky was in this class, I'm sure he would love Mykel Williams. But you start looking at the draft and you should start looking at clean prospects and who's going to go high. And there's just not that many clean prospects that have good character reports that meet height, weight, speed, and teams love themselves a prototype defensive end. And especially those teams that have a 4-man front, there's just not that many of those guys. So that's why I wanted to bring up Mykel Williams on this episode, because I was shocked at how surprised people were that I brought up his name for the 49ers. Now, maybe he's a little too close to Yetur Gross-Matos as a sort of a bigger defensive end, and maybe the 49ers will go in a different direction. But I think people might be shocked about how high some players go that just meet physical thresholds in this draft, because there's a lot of prospects that don't check a lot of boxes in this class.
Mykel Williams, very, very productive here. We got Brash Cat in the chat, and he says, Justin Smith greater than Aldon Smith. I will say this. When we go back and we kind of watch some of those games, it did feel like, not that Justin Smith was responsible for all of Aldon Smith's production, but I remember those stunts and those plays where, Justin Smith pulling guys and Aldon Smith looping underneath and getting sacks. But when you listen to any offensive lineman tell you the toughest guy that they ever had to block, I feel like it had been like 100% Aldon Smith.
Including 49ers greats Trent Williams and Joe Staley, who both said the same thing. Yeah.
I watched the podcast and there was some guys and they were basically like, all right, I already know who you're going to say. He was like, on 3, we'll say the name. And like 1, 2, 3, Aldon Smith. Like everybody says, oh, he was just so difficult, so difficult to block.
Was that Staley and Williams? Trent Williams?
Was it? Okay, maybe that was it. But I've heard it a few other times too when people talk about just, hey, man, great pass rush. Oh, Aldon Smith.
Yeah. I mean, he's a freak of nature. Yeah. And so, yeah, you're drafting what a player could be, and there's going to be some projection with all these guys. But if you want to know who's going to go high in the NFL draft, go through there and do this for me and let me know at BD Peacock, let Croc know at Crocky209, drop a comment on YouTube. Go through the NFL draft, go through the consensus big board. And look, by the way, Mykel Williams is 15 on the consensus big board. So if you think it's crazy that he would go 11 instead of 15, then you're out of your mind, because that's not crazy. If you think that someone who's 5 or 6 would go 15, then you're also crazy and you're out of your mind. Like prepare to be shocked with the NFL draft. But go through the top prospects in the draft and tell me which prospects are pretty clean. Like they've got some production. They meet a prototype for their position. They have a high positional value, and they have, no character concerns or anything like that. You've seen them work out. You know what their height, weight, speed is. There's not that many of those guys out there at all. Like there's shockingly few this year, maybe fewer than ever in this year's draft. That's why guys like Membo, guys like, I think Mykel Williams, I think those guys are just going to go high.
I think you kind of sold me on the 49ers taking Mykel Williams. Like we know that 49ers, they got to get strong up front. They need an edge rusher opposite Nick Bosa. Not a high sack volume guy, but a very productive sack guy, as opposed to the Texas A&M kid who has like 4 career sacks. I mean, Mykel Williams, he's getting 4.5, 5 sacks every season that he plays.
Yeah, Mykel Williams,
and we know Georgia guys, they haven't been high sack production type guys. So he's giving you production. He's getting sacks. He's a big body. He's strong. He's definitely athletic enough, and for what he is. You could sell me on that. Before I was taking him at 11.
And I'm not saying I necessarily would make that pick. I'm just saying you shouldn't be shocked by it. And there's probably a lot of things that you should not be shocked by in the NFL draft. And it's going to be a wild one. I think the grades are all over the place in this year's class, and it's going to be a really interesting draft. And buckle up for it. And I can't wait for it. Croc and I are going to be here with you every step of the way. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On 49ers on YouTube. Anywhere you listen to your podcasts. For your second listen, check out any of the other 200 pods right here on the Locked On Network, Locked On NFL Draft, the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. And Croc and I will be back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.